Welcome back. Not every presidential transition has to be as difficult as this one has been. Under President George W. Bush, Admiral Mike Mullen on the right was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Bob Gates on the left was defense secretary. And President Obama kept both men in their jobs, ensuring an even smoother transition of power than normal. Admiral Mullen knows what a proper transition looks like and why a rocky one can have serious national security implications, and he joins me now. Admiral Mullen, welcome back to Meet the Press. And I'll be honest, I was very focused on getting you on here about over a week ago on the news about Afghanistan and the decisions that the president was making right before he was handing over power. And I had my own flashback to decisions you were involved with in Afghanistan. And then the assassination happened last night or over the weekend. So I want to start with Iran, Admiral Mullen, and what you think the implications are going forward for a President Biden and the Iran nuclear deal.
Well, I think the assassination makes it much more challenging, if you will, Chuck, in terms of where President-elect Biden wants to go in terms of renegotiating or making, re-entering into the nuclear deal specifically. I'm hopeful that actually President-elect Biden can do that. Fakhrizadeh was at the heart of the Iranian nuclear program and has been for years, not only the brains, but also the passion behind it. So his assassination is really a significant event, not unlike a year ago when we took out Soleimani.
Right.
It's a real center of gravity, if you will, for that program. That doesn't mean there aren't other nuclear scientists or that Iran can't continue on. So I really, I expect this. Certainly the media is reporting that tensions are on the rise. There's an Israeli component to this, meaning Israel is, Iran is a nuclear weapon in Iran is an existential threat to Israel, and Israel will do all it can to make sure that never happens. So I'm hopeful that President-elect Biden can actually reach in and calm the waters, but I think this heightens tension significantly.
Look, we still have another 50 days before the transfer of power. It certainly looks to the layperson that, and Israel looks at its national security priorities and thought, boy, the timing, we better do this now before there's a new American president. What other situations are there around the world right now that you're concerned that there may be more attempts at tying the hands of the new president?
Well, I think I'm actually very concerned about the Trump loyalists who have now gone to work in the Pentagon. I mean, recently Secretary Esper was fired and a host of other people left the building. And there are some real Trump loyalists there now in charge. And it's pretty difficult to think that over the course of 50 or 60 days, you can do something constructive, but you can do something that's really destructive. And a week ago, there were many media reports that there was a debate about action against Iran specifically, that the president reportedly turned down. But I would be concerned that those issues continue to be raised. You mentioned the troops in Afghanistan coming out there. There are reports now of bringing troops home from Somalia, and just, I guess, generally trying to get as many troops home before the inauguration as possible. I just think we need to be very careful with that. Yeah. I'd like everybody to come home as well. The reality is, on the ground in places like Somalia and Afghanistan, there are still terrorists who would do us ill. And I want to play actually the game on their turf and not play it here. If we just come home, my fear is that they arrive here in the United States, and we've been through that before, and I never want to see that happen again.
Look, I made a point at the start of our interview about sort of the transition from Bush to Obama, but I want to put it in starker terms here. Here was the New York Times headline just a week ago: Trump using last days to lock in policies and make Biden's task more difficult. And here's an excerpt from Robert Gates's book, Duty, where he says, in December, Bush was prepared to approve the additional 20,000 troops. This is December of 2008. And Steve Hadley asked Obama's national security advisor designate, Jim Jones — Steve Hadley was Bush's national security advisor — whether the new Obama administration preferred that Bush make the troop decision and take the heat or hold off. And the new team opted for the second course. The point was, This was a transition, and granted, made easier because Gates was staying over, where there was consultation and there was a concern, what would the world think if one president boxed in another president? Now we have one American president boxing in another American president. What message does that send to the world, Admiral Mullen?
One of the things that I learned in the job that I had is you'd like to do all you can to not box in the president, to give any president as many options and as much space as possible. So this is obviously the opposite case right now. In fact, I thought President Bush set the tone for the issue you mentioned, but also a handful of other issues that I saw that these were decisions that were going to be impactful on the next president, and it was his desire, that is President Bush, to make sure that President Obama had a vote specifically. And the example that you lay out is one significant example. Specifically. So it appears that the current administration is trying to lock in as many options, as many issues as possible to make it much more difficult for President-elect Biden to govern. And actually, historically, that has just never been the case. I worry that, in a time where you just went through, where we are on the pandemic, specifically the challenge we have in the economy, and national security issues do not wait. It's going to be a particularly difficult transition in that arena, actually having started 3 weeks late. So it is, I think our allies, our friends, and our enemies look at us at a time of real fragility in that regard. And our enemies always try to look and take advantage of a transition period.
Very quickly, what do you tell those that are still wearing the uniform active duty, whether it's General Milley on down, and they see what these staffers are doing right now at the Pentagon, and they're very nervous about it? How publicly should they be sounding alarms?
Well, I have a lot of faith in General Milley, that he understands where he's working and who's in the building, and confident that he's actually sending the right message. And he said it recently at an event locally in Washington, where the United States military, men and women, support and defend the Constitution. We do not support and defend an individual or an individual office. And I think that's the message. Milley's been very strong on that, and that's the right message to them.
Admiral Mike Mullen, the former chair of the Joint Chiefs, retired admiral, of course. Thanks for coming on and sharing your perspective, sir. I always appreciate it.
Thank you, Chuck.
Hello from Washington. I'm Chuck Todd, and thanks for checking out the Meet the Press channel on YouTube. Click on the button down here to subscribe, and click over here to watch the latest interviews, highlights, and other digital exclusives.